Welcome to Enlightenment Unknown, Life of a Spiritual Nomad. Join Reiki Master and Quantum Healing Expert Wes Coons as he guides listeners through the depths of self-discovery and spiritual enlightenment to uncover the version of you we haven't met yet.
Welcome to Enlightenment Unknown, Life of a Spiritual Nomad. My name is Wes Coons, and welcome back to the show. I have a special guest. Her name is Fawn. Say hi, Fawn.
Hello out there.
Today is going to be a fantastic episode, but before we get to that, I wanted to say thank you. Thank you for listening to the show, and I have some numbers I wanted to share with you. Russia, hey, thank you. You're killing it. Russia's number one besides the United States listening to the show. We've got Brazil, Mexico, Canada, Belgium, Chile, and Japan. And we just picked up, you know what we just picked up?
What?
Costa Rica.
What? No way.
I want to go to Costa Rica. I want to go surfing. I got a lot of friends go to Costa Rica surfing. So, hey, there's a thing on this show, Fawn, that if you listen to it and we come to their country, they have to let us stay there.
Nice.
Yeah.
I visited Costa Rica almost a year ago.
Did you? What'd you do in Costa Rica?
I decided to go to a plant medicine retreat to journey with ayahuasca.
That's one thing I haven't done. I don't know. It scares me a little bit, but
It is pretty intense. It's not for the faint of heart.
have you listened to the podcast or not?
Not yet.
So you listen to some of the shit I talk about on this, going through the haunted house, you'll understand why it makes me a little nervous to take something and go through that,
I
right?
could see why.
It was a fucked up podcast, but it was good.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope you all enjoyed the podcast. We still have Diana that wants to come on the show, and she's got some things going on. We'll get her here shortly. We've got a ton of healers and spiritual people lined up over the next, probably the rest of this year. I think I've got 20 people that want to be on the show. Isn't that cool?
Yeah, that's amazing.
Only 4 of them know it so far, but the rest, they're going to want to be on it.
That's a lot of good information.
Yeah, it was fun. I'm sitting there thinking, what are we going to do? Because at the end of the day, the haunted house stuff is over. We're starting the spiritual journey. And this show is about how life happens for you and not to you, and how we can honor ourselves. We honor our bodies. And when we're quiet, we can hear God's whisper. And that's why you're here today, isn't it?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. So you went through some pretty traumatic stuff with your health, what,
Yes.
2 years ago?
It'll be 2 years next month in February. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And they diagnosed you with what?
They diagnosed me with breast cancer that had spread to 2 nearby lymph nodes already. I could feel the tumor. I felt it, probably a year and a half before my diagnosis. But because I had been a vegan for 14 years, I had no family history of any type of cancer. I never thought that something like that would ever happen to me. I just thought it was a cyst. My primary care physician, when she did her routine breast exam on me, never said anything about it. And then when I had my first general mammogram, it came back fine. So I thought, okay, everything's all right. 6 months after that mammogram, when I had my next physical, let my doctor do the routine breast exam on me again, and she still didn't say anything. So I finally spoke up and I said, hey, I feel this lump right here. And she said, okay, yeah, now I feel it. Let's get you scheduled for an ultrasound. And it took about a month and a half to get that scheduled and get that done. So, of course, it went from there, from the ultrasound to having a biopsy, and the biopsy coming back that it was indeed cancer. So in that moment, when you're told this, you feel like the world is crashing down around you. I had never known anyone that had this before. I didn't have any family members go through this. I didn't have any close friends go through this. So I was not at all familiar with the terminology. Fortunately, one of my best friends, Robin, was with me through it all, and she had been through it with several of her family members. She understood more about what they were saying. I just remember being in such shock that I couldn't believe I was hearing those words, because I never envisioned there would be a day where I would have to deal with cancer. It was a lot to process in that moment, and a lot to sit with over the next few days. They tend to put you on the fast track of endless appointments and tests from there. They don't even really give you time to let it digest and sink in. Within 24 hours, I was in front of the breast surgeon. Leading up to that, I thought that perhaps I wasn't going to have to do chemo, but she was like, no, we want to do chemo right away, the most aggressive chemo, and followed by surgery, most likely a double mastectomy, followed by targeted radiation, followed by hormone therapy because it was an estrogen-driven tumor. I was facing a year of this absolute insanity that I couldn't wrap my head around at all. So there was about a week between seeing her and having my tests done to make sure it hadn't spread any further. I finally had some time to sit with it. Obviously, there's a lot of emotions that come to the surface and come out. Unfortunately, there's such a stigma around hearing that word.
It's scary.
Yeah, you immediately associate it with death.
Yeah. You did a different journey than other people. Listen to your doctor and you do what you need to do, but you did something different. So what was your mindset? I mean, I've heard other people, the doctors come in, they pressure you to start going down their route. And there is no other route except for what this person is saying at that moment. Did you experience that?
Yes, I did. I had always heard about the fear and intimidation that's instilled in people around a diagnosis like this. But to be the one experiencing it firsthand was definitely not something I ever expected to go through, and it was very nerve-wracking. Once I had my MRI, I had a CT scan, I had a bone density test, and then the very next day, I was scheduled to meet with the oncologist. By that point, I felt like I was starting to come into my power. I had been led to a gentleman by the name of Chris Wark, who wrote a book called Chris Beat Cancer. That kind of became my Bible. I had also been told, hey, before you meet with the oncologist, you want to go look at his website because he has a list of questions for you to ask the oncologist. And when I started looking at these questions the night before I was to meet with the oncologist, I was like, yeah, this is resonating with me a lot.
The book's name is
Chris Beat Cancer.
And what's his website?
I think it's chrisbeatcancer.com. You can definitely find the book on Amazon, and he also has an accompanying cookbook. It's a very good, informative book, not just from, hey, these are the best foods to eat. He had his own journey with cancer years ago and healed it naturally. That's what prompted him to write this book and share what he learned on his journey. And also a very faith-based, divinely guided journey as well. And he talks about that a lot in the books. I had a couple people recommend that book to me immediately. Like that was the first.
I never heard of that book before. And I've heard of a lot of people that have, it's interesting how some people can cure it themselves. Joel Osteen, I love his show, and he talks about all the time, his mother was stage 4 cancer. It's stage 4. She only had maybe a month left. And that was 42 years ago. And she's been cancer-free, never took any medication.
I didn't even really start hearing a lot about these stories at that time. I learned about that at a later time, but there's just so many things out there now in the world of mind, body, spirit healing that you don't feel like you have to be a victim to a diagnosis like this, and you don't feel like you need to be forced into that one-size-fits-all treatment plan that Western medicine tends to offer. Even before this diagnosis, I could never understand how all of these, like the American Cancer Society, Susan B. Komen, how have these places raised all this money and all this time and effort that has gone into alleged cancer research, and this is still the best option that they have to offer people is chemo and radiation. And so I began to understand that this wasn't just not resonating with me at all. And when I came face to face with the oncologist, and he was more or less a condescending prick, I knew right then that there was no way I was going to put my body and my health in this man's hands. You have to trust that these doctors, their heart's in the right place, but unfortunately, they are not taught a lot in medical school about diet and nutrition. And obviously the mind, body, spirit connection falls outside of Western medicine altogether.
Yeah, they're scientists. I had a friend that just passed away from cancer a couple weeks ago. This doctor was a new doctor and she was clueless. My friend Diana, that's going to come on the show, is a retired hospice nurse, and she helped her cousin go through this. She was telling the doctor what to do, and this lady is in charge of everything. It was horrible.
I could never get on board with the idea of doing something that was going to make me so physically sick. I couldn't understand how that was supposed to make me better. The oncologist more or less told me when he could sense that I was not going to be on board with what they wanted to do. And I was asking him some questions. I think that was making him a little uncomfortable from the questions that Chris Work has on his website. That's when the fear and intimidation tactics started getting thrown at me. I was told that I was walking a tightrope between life and death, that I did not have time to look into other options. And in my mind, too, I was like, okay, I felt this lump. This is now March of 2023. I felt this lump probably mid to late 2021. And we're now almost a year and a half into it, and it's only spread to nearby lymph nodes because all of my scans and tests had come back clear. It hadn't spread beyond that. So I'm like, okay, in that time, yes, time is of the essence, but I felt like given that, I had some time to at least honor my body and honor myself and look into what else is out there, and not necessarily what they were wanting to do to me. So the thing that sealed it for me, hearing this oncologist talk about, we want to do what they consider, they don't call it this, but it's referred to as red devil chemo, which is the most aggressive chemo. I think 4 sessions of that followed by 8 sessions of regular chemo. So before starting this, he said I needed to have an EKG done on my heart to make sure that it was strong enough to withstand this level of chemo that they wanted to do on me. And that's what sealed the deal right there, because I'm like, how is something that you test the strength of my heart for in order to see if it's strong enough to endure this? How is this good for me? So that's where I was like, okay, I let them go ahead and schedule the appointments. I had my port placement surgery scheduled. I had the chemo session scheduled. But I had 2 or 3 weeks before this was all supposed to start. And I was like, I'm going to go home and I'm just going to sit with this. And I am going to look at what I can look at and see what else is out there and listen to my body, listen to my instincts. And that's exactly what I did. I ended up calling them. And I knew that it was always going to be there. If I did decide, yeah, maybe I should do this, it was always going to be there for me to do. It's not like I had to make that decision right in that moment.
Sure.
So I ended up canceling all the appointments and I just set off on my own journey and my own path of natural healing. And yes, there's a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of uncertainty. And no matter what information that you find, would be like with Chris Work or other people that have gone through the same thing, you end up forging your own path along the way, because you just take nuggets of different information from what worked for other people and whatever else is out there, and you just build your own healing plan and build your own treatment plan in that way.
Yeah, that takes a lot of courage to do that. You're a strong-ass woman, and I appreciate that about you. And I would imagine you felt pretty isolated, wouldn't you? I know what I went through with my stuff a couple of years ago and the way the doctor spoke to me. And to me, that's blind faith. There's blind faith that the spirit, that God is whispering to you, listening to your body. You're a very gifted woman as well. And so what did that look like for you mentally? Because there's a mental game to this at a high level, and it's easy. It could be easy to veer from your faith during that.
It absolutely is. And you have to also take into account that when you get a diagnosis like this and you start telling your family and friends and you start telling them about what the diagnosis is, what the prognosis is, and what they want to do to you, when you decide to venture off away from what Western medicine wants to do and all that, you start to see other people's reactions. And if you're not careful, their reactions can cause you to maybe go one way or the other that you shouldn't. You have to understand that their reactions are all based in and rooted in their own trauma of their experiences around people they love having cancer, or
Sure.
maybe even themselves having had cancer. And that's what drives them to react in that way. So they can project a lot of that fear onto you. And then you start trying to second guessing yourself. Oh my God, maybe I'm not doing the right thing. Maybe I should do this. So I feel like everyone obviously meant well. Everyone was there to support me, whatever that looked like. But it was definitely a whole different set of challenges to not allow that fear to take hold when I had friends or family members that were like, oh, I don't know. Are you sure you really want to do that? Like, don't you think you should
Sure.
probably listen to the doctors? And yeah, like I said, it presents a whole new set of challenges. So I had people that were like, yeah, you're absolutely doing the right thing. You were listening to your body. Ultimately, you take this feedback and you take that kind of stuff, and you still have to do what you feel is best for you. And you still have to trust that you're going to be led to the information, you're going to be led to the knowledge, and you're going to be led to the people who you're meant to be led to help you along this journey. And that was what I kept coming back to. That was what I held faith in. And it turned out to be exactly what happened.
Yeah. I think people make decisions and statements and stuff based off, like you said, with their past experience. And typically that is based off of fear. And we're not doctors. We don't go and read all the medical stuff. And like we were talking about earlier, you're going to go and have something that's potentially going to kill you, that's going to save you. And I've had so many friends, they're like, yeah, the cancer didn't kill Timmy. It was the treatment. My friend Sandra Grace Brooks, she passed away from pancreatic cancer. And I remember when she called me one day, she said, honey, what would you do? And we talked about it. And I told her what I would do. And she says, I'm not going to have the chemo. I'm not going to have the surgeries, because at the end of the day, she needed to honor her. And I don't believe we're going to go to heaven if it's not our time.
Mm-hmm. And I'm not here to tell anybody not to do chemo. Like, you need to listen to
Yes.
your body. You need to listen to what resonates with you, what lands with you. If that's what you feel like is best for you, then believe in it. That's whatever you end up doing, just you have to believe that it's going to work and that it's going to
Exactly.
all be
Yeah.
okay. So it didn't resonate with me. Doesn't mean it doesn't resonate with other people, but it just didn't resonate with me.
You're right, Fawn. I want the listeners to hear, we're talking about her faith, her spirituality, and her decision. Go to your doctor, do what you and your family feel is appropriate. But what I want you to hear is she never gave up.
Yes, and there was definitely some very dark moments. And that's when you have to be careful not to let the fear take hold of you. I had no idea that pent-up emotions, a lifetime of pent-up emotions, all these things, I had no idea the kind of toll that takes on your body and your central nervous system and your well-being. It's opened my eyes and my mind to a whole different world that I would have never otherwise been exposed to, which leads me to another point that I want to make, in that with my journey, I always looked at it from a place of gratitude. I could never look at it from anger or something that I felt like I had to fight, because it's me, it's my body, it's something that my body created. And Chris Work speaks this in his book. If something your body created, it's something your body can heal. And that resonated with me a lot. With my journey, I always felt, look at all the amazing things that have come from this now. Look at the people that I've met that I would have never otherwise met. Look at all the ways that I've learned how to take better care of myself as far as diet, nutrition, health and wellness, and mindfulness. And it's led me down this whole path of healing past traumas and things like that. I've gone deep into so many different modalities and so many different things that I would have never otherwise been led to were it not for this diagnosis. So I have nothing but gratitude for what it has shown me, where it has led me, and the people that it's brought into my life. You include it.
Thanks. I appreciate that. I always work hard to give you opportunities to heal, don't I?
Yeah, always.
So, have you seen the Netflix show? I think it's called Healed.
I've seen a documentary called Heal that,
Healed, that's it.
yeah, that Kelly
Yep.
Gores did.
Mhm.
That was actually, it's funny you mentioned that because about a month or so into this, when I was having one of those nights where I was like, God, because you end up spending so much time looking at things and researching things, and you get thrown a lot of different advice from people and a lot of different things that you have to sort through and filter through. And sometimes it can get to be a little overwhelming. You feel like it's a full-time job to go this route. And I was having one of those nights where I was like, God, I don't know, am I doing the right thing? And I decided to distract myself. I cut the TV on, and somehow or another, I wasn't even searching for anything in particular, but somehow or another, her documentary came up on Amazon Prime, and I watched it, and it was the message that I absolutely needed to hear in that moment more than anything. I've watched that documentary so many times, and she's someone that I listen to her podcast and follow on Instagram, and my love to her, I feel horrible because she lost her fire in the Pacific Palisades fire and the recent Los Angeles fires, but it had a profound impact on me and my mentality.
Mm-hmm.
And I watched it that night, and the next morning, it was Good Friday, 2023. I woke up and got a call from my mom that I will never forget, a very frantic and desperate and upset call that my father had passed away.
Yeah, I'm sorry. If you think about that, because he's popped in a few times since you've been here at the house, he loved you so much, he crossed over.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I kept going back to
Yeah.
because it was very sudden and unexpected. And he had passed in his sleep, and she found him the next morning, and she called me screaming and crying, and it was a whole traumatic moment and event. And I had just watched this documentary before, and I kept having in my head, don't let your body get into fight or flight mode. So I had to process my emotions, and I live 4.5 hours away. My mom and my parents are in Roanoke. I'm here in Virginia Beach. It was a matter of having to get things put together and packed and get a pet sitter lined up for my cats and tell my job what was going on. And luckily, my friend Robin, she made a beeline for my place because she had lost her father. She knew exactly what I was going through. So she cried with me that day. And the thing I kept coming back to was like, why now, Dad? Like, why now? A month into this, and I felt I was like that little girl, like I needed my dad.
Yeah.
And then it came to me that he felt like he could help me more from the other side.
He can.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he has.
Yeah, he's definitely been with me throughout all of this. Without a doubt. It was a tough week. I was in a very strict routine at that point of juicing and fasting and obviously eating clean. And I literally had to pack up my entire kitchen, it felt, to go home, have my juicer with me, all my produce, all the stuff. It was quite an undertaking, but I got to Roanoke, and we, of course, had to deal with what you have to deal with when you lose a loved one, all the things that you have to tie up, the loose ends, the affairs, all that. So I was thrown into that. I'm an only child. I don't have any siblings to help me with stuff like that. And my dad handled everything. My mom wasn't someone that dealt with a lot of those things. So I had to take the reins in that moment and do what needed to be done and put my own situation to the side. And throughout the process, it got to the point where I felt like I was never truly able to grieve for my dad, because we're trying to deal with what you deal with when you lose someone. And then in addition to that, I'm trying to live. I'm trying to do what I have to do to survive. And it was a very challenging and difficult time. But again, I have nothing but gratitude for everything, because so much happened and I was led to so many things that I would have never otherwise been led to. And
Sure. In that scenario right there, you have two choices. You could be angry as hell that Dad's not there, Or you could look at, he loved me so much, he crossed over to help me survive and live my life. It's a mindset shift, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
especially when you're going through something like this. My sister Barb has been stage 4 lymphoma for like 20 years, literally.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't have to take medication. The doctors, I can't explain it, but she's always laughing. She's always smiling. She's always looking to the light, and she doesn't go to church or anything like that, but she's always on the positive side. And we all believe the reason she's still here is because of her mindset.
Absolutely.
It's everything.
It is 100% everything. And I've never been one to be positive and overflowing with that kind of stuff. I've always viewed the world through more of a pessimistic lens, which I'm learning more about. I'm entrenched in DNA testing I had done recently, and that's part of what has come out of this is learning more about my genes, and that's something.
Yeah. So she just did this DNA test that came back and basically said that she's genetically a pain in the ass, which is awesome.
It came back that I have a predisposition to be more irritable and frustrated because I view the world in such a level of detail that I get frustrated because I expect everybody else to look at that in the same way, and that's not how everybody else is genetically made up. It's a whole other fascinating world, but I say all that to say that I was never one that lived in a positive mindset. I was always pessimistic, even negative. I would look for the worst possible outcomes in any given situation instead of focusing on what I actually wanted the outcome to be and the good that could happen. I would always, what if this happens? What if that happens? And you have a hamster wheel brain. For me to come to a place where I'm living in gratitude and positivity was in and of itself a journey. But I, through that, learned, yes, absolutely, mindset and the mind-body-spirit connection is everything.
Yeah. I tell you what, I've traveled to a lot of places, and one of the places I went to energetically that was so difficult for me to be was Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
I was there when Kobe Bryant had passed away, and I was in the hotel next door when his funeral was going on. Put it this way, I paid $600 to fly home 5 hours early.
Wow.
The energy was that difficult. Now, you lived in LA for a while, didn't you?
I did, yeah. I lived there from 2007 to 2013, about 6 years.
I guess the energy didn't mess with you, but it could have just been me and where I was. I was still going through the haunted house, so I had a lot going on. And
I was not aware of the things then that I'm aware of now. I was 30 years old and I was all about having fun and going to see bands play. And I lived in a very surface level type of existence where
Sure.
I was just looking forward to the next concert, looking forward to the next show, looking forward to.
you were younger too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. How old were you?
I was 30 when I moved there.
Okay.
I started taking trips there when I was like 23 years old. And I grew up on all the bands from the Sunset Strip back in the 80s. And I was always obsessed with getting to Los Angeles for
That's
that reason.
cool.
I want to go to the Rainbow. I want to go to the Whiskey. I want to be on Sunset Strip. I want to have nights like they had and all this crazy wild debauchery and all that. So that's why I started taking trips out there. And but when I was living there, I wasn't thinking in terms of energetic frequency
Sure.
or any of that kind of stuff. I was just
hanging out, having a good time.
I was just having my fun.
Yeah.
Los Angeles is definitely, I look at it in two different ways. I could have never had the experiences that I had there in any other city. It has its own beauty, even though it is a very energetically different place. Sometimes challenging to keep a good head on your shoulders there. You can easily be persuaded into things that you wouldn't otherwise be persuaded into, or a lot of people there are focused on themselves, and that can kind of mess with you too. And you feel like you've connected with someone and you have a new friend or whatever, and then you see that person again and the following weekend or whenever, and they act like they don't even know who you are. It was a lot of people, what can you do for me? If you can't do anything for me, then I don't need to have you in my life or be friends with you. It's a minefield of different things like that. It can be. But like I said, I definitely had my experience there that I'm grateful for, and I have no regrets at all where that's concerned. It brought people into my life, both through my jobs, through my social settings that I would have otherwise never met. So I had my own healing journey, so to speak, when I lived there and got burnt out with the scene and pulled away from it and went through my own thing there. But
Everything's a journey. There's lessons to be learned everywhere. If you think about, we've talked on the show many times, we're here on a soul contract. Even if you did something that is perceived as wrong or a mistake, it's actually was the right step because it was predetermined. It was preordained. God knew that was going to happen.
yeah, and it's easy too with a diagnosis like this to think, oh my God, what did I do wrong? Like,
Mhm.
what was I doing that led to this? So you have to be careful too not to go down that rabbit hole. With me, I felt like I could look at, because when you ask the doctors what caused this, why did this happen, they have no answer for you. Oh,
Sure.
it could be it could be anything. It could be they're not interested in honing in on what caused your body to do this, because to me that's where the answer lied. That's how I was going to know, make that it wasn't going to happen again. It wasn't going to come back.
It could have come from the food that they feed us that has all these poisons in it. It could have come from a lot of things.
When I went back in my head trying to figure it out for myself, like what could have led to this happening, I could point the finger a little bit to going back on birth control pills in my 40s. That was not something I should have done. I did that because I was having perimenopause symptoms and I thought that was a way to get a better control over my periods and the things that were happening around that. I wasn't properly warned about the correlation between being on birth control pills and breast cancer when you're in your 40s. In addition to that, I ended up having an extremely low vitamin D level around that time too. So I think you can potentially say that kind of created the perfect storm for something like this to start in my body. But obviously cancer, the way I look at it, it's like rotten emotions. And I was never one to process my emotions. I always kept everything bottled up inside of me.
Sure. So you're like a lot of us. We're not taught how to do that, are we?
No, you're not. And I was always the type to want to avoid any type of drama or awkwardness or anything like that. I didn't like arguing. I didn't like fighting. So rather than speak my truth in those moments and deal with whatever the fallout was, I would just keep everything inside of me. And I had no idea the toll that would take on me.
They say energetically, I believe breast cancer goes to lack of self-love and also wanting to be nurtured. So we see it all the time, women that stand up and take care of their household and the household doesn't honor the wife. And so they want to be honored and they end up manifesting breast cancer.
Yeah, it's definitely something you hear more and more that women are dealing with. And we are very emotional beings, obviously. That's part of our power too and our instinct. But it's with my journey, that was definitely the biggest part, or one of the biggest parts that came out of it was my journey back to self-love, because I realized that so much of my life was spent in a place where I did not love myself and I did not honor myself. And that's been an important part of this for me too. And plant medicine helped to bring that out a lot. And it's a whole other separate episode. But
Yeah.
one of the things that happened in my experience at this plant medicine retreat in Costa Rica was they asked us in the beginning to write down our intentions, also to write down a symbol that we felt like symbolized us in some way. And they're like, if you can't think of anything, don't worry about it. It'll come to you throughout the week. And I couldn't think of anything. I started noticing throughout the week that as I would walk along the beach, I kept seeing these heart-shaped rocks in the sand. And even if the rock itself wasn't in the shape of a heart, the sand and the water had washed over it such that it would look like a heart. And so I was like, okay, that's going to be my symbol. And that symbolizes my journey back to myself, my journey back to self-love. Who am I really? Start peeling all the layers back and get to the root of it all. And so now I see hearts all the time in
Love
the
that.
most
I
crazy.
love that.
I have a whole album on my phone called Random Hearts. It's hearts I see in the most crazy ways, that in food or, walking along in nature and just glance down on the ground, there's something laying there that's in the shape of a heart, a leaf, or, a piece of debris or some pine needles that have blown into the shape of a heart. It's crazy. It's like God telling me, angels telling me, we're here, you're still on this divinely guided path. And it's just like seeing angel numbers and stuff like that. It's my sign.
Yeah. I think you said earlier that you felt like this was your pathway back to self-love. So do you feel like you've been divinely guided? Do you think that Jesus has whispered in your ear, placed people in front of you? I think you'd mentioned a lady that you met out in Chesapeake and it helped you a lot and stuff like that.
Yeah, it was immediately made known and obvious to me that I was definitely on a divinely guided path. And the people that came into my life in those first couple of months proved that. And the ways that I would be in the right place at the right time to meet this person or to be introduced to this person all led up to me eventually having the procedure that I had, which was a cryoablation procedure. Because of that belief that I had, and I would tell myself, like, part of my daily affirmations was, I am on a divinely guided path. I trust that I will be led to the people and the knowledge that I'm meant to be led to heal me, all that kind of stuff. So I was led to someone who had this procedure done, and I had never heard of this before. I don't even know that I would have found this on my own had I not.
Where did you find it?
My friend Kelly had told me about her friend that had this procedure done. I happened to be, again, in a place I would have never otherwise normally been in on a Friday night, and was able to see Kelly in that setting. And she was like, hey, my friend just went out west and had this procedure done. You should look into it. You should contact her and look into it. So she gave me her contact information. I contacted her the next day, and she was like, yeah, this is what it looks like. This is the surgeon that did it, blah, blah, blah. So I contacted the surgeon and was off and running and ended up having the procedure about, I don't know, a month and a half, 2 months later.
Nice. Would you mind sharing the name of the surgeon in case somebody wants to find them?
Her name is Dr. Jean, Jeane Stryker. Her website is strikermd.net. Stryker is spelled Stryker.
Nice.
And she approaches cancer in a different way. She was driven to do this by losing her own mother to breast cancer. Cryoablation has been used apparently in the cardiovascular world for a long time. It's just started to come into the cancer world, from my understanding. Essentially what it entails is she uses ultrasound to guide her. It's an outpatient procedure. It's minimally invasive. She uses probes to go in and deep freeze the tumor, as well as any surrounding areas. My tumor was about 2 centimeters big, and she engulfed twice the size of that tumor to make sure that it was going to be killed. And she did the same within the lymph nodes it had spread to. She also utilizes what's called a circulating tumor cell test through a company called Signatera. And I had that test done prior to the procedure, and it came back a medium level, definitely concerning, and definitely good that I was about to do the procedure when I was. So that indicated, what they do is they get a sample of your biopsy that's done here locally, and they break down the whole genomic profile of what genetic mutations comprised this tumor. And it's those genetic mutations, those cells that they're looking for in your blood. That's the test I had done about a month before I had the procedure. And then all the tests after my procedure came back negative, or like trace amounts, because there is die-off that happens in the side of this tumor. Once it's frozen, it slowly dies off over time, and your body rids itself of it. So that die-off will show up on these tests.
Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
I seen something the other day where they're saying they're using sound to heal the human body, and there's got to be better ways. But the hard part is people are getting rich off this. When I went to the oncologist a couple years ago, you go to the doctor's waiting room and it's 20 by 20 or something. This was over 2,000 square foot just for a waiting room, and it was packed. I'm like, this is crazy. This is crazy. And I spent probably 6 minutes with the doctor. So that shows how many people they go through
It's very unfortunate that Western medicine has evolved into what it's evolved into, where it's a very profit-driven model, profits over patients. And you're going to hopefully hear a lot more about this once the administration changes tomorrow, and RFK Jr. is a lot of what he's pointed out has come to light. And that's great. And there's been a big movement behind cleaner food and taking all this crap out of our foods. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you can't wait and rely on the government to fix it for you. You have to empower yourself, and you have to.
Yeah, the government doesn't give a shit about us.
No, they really don't.
No, when I was in the first Gulf War, they had these guys that were CIA that were dressed in Marine Corps uniforms, and me being me, I'm the only one that spoke up. I'm like, who are these fucking fools? They weren't, you can tell what a Marine is, and they were not Marine Corps officers. And they're like, don't worry about it. You're going to get the shot. And if you don't get the shot, we're going to fucking shoot you, because you're not going to be court-martialed. Obviously, they weren't going to fucking kill us, but your career would have been over. You would have been humiliated. And lo and behold, guess what? They turned out to be CIA people that were there doing experimental drugs on us.
Heard about that.
Yeah. When COVID came around and they wanted us to do the vaccines, I'm like, fuck you. I'm not getting that vaccine. No.
Yeah, again, just much along the same lines as chemo, it didn't resonate with me either. I couldn't understand how something that was going to make me sick was going to help me in any way or make me better. And I approached it from a different perspective, just because I've been a vegan for so long and was involved in animal rights stuff years ago. And I knew that not only had they been tested on animals, they had animal products in them. So I was like, yeah, I'm not sure that I really want that. I never got flu shots or anything like that. So I just don't think, I don't really think that's something I want in my body. And I was looking, I'd heard they were developing a plant-based vaccine, which I was keeping an eye on, and could have potentially been something that I would have done, but I didn't do that. I just felt like once I started seeing the fallout of it all, I was like, yeah, I definitely made the right decision. And then once I had this diagnosis, and I definitely felt like I had made the right decision.
My whole thing was, you're trying to take our rights away. It's my body, my choice, right? I wasn't going to do it. I have friends that did. I have friends that didn't. I have friends that did and they died. A couple of years ago, I ended up in the hospital with AFib, and I thought it was interesting that the head doctor of the emergency room and the number one heart surgeon in this market were in the same room at the same time asking me if I had received the vaccine. And I said no. And I asked him why. He says, because it's making so many people sick. And one of the main things it does is give AFib. So they were a little confused on how AFib turned on for me. But I think that's something maybe it was the vaccine back in the day. Maybe it was just my body. I don't know. I think I'm perfect physical condition.
Are you now?
Yeah, I am. I am perfect physical condition. The hard part is you're never going to know what caused what. And life is short. But what I do know is this, is you're a blessing. And I've enjoyed our friendship. I'm confident you're going to be doing a podcast in the future.
That's the goal. I think I was always waiting to get to a finish line and say, okay, now I can go back and share all this. But that finish line is non-existent. You're always dealing with something and always growing and evolving and changing. And I've immersed myself, like I said, into so many different things as a result of this. And it's been a whole process in and of itself too, to have a procedure like this, because you are left with a dead, frozen lump still inside of my breast. And that's been its own journey in and of itself to work through the emotions and the things that come from that. Because if you're not careful, you can still feel like, oh my God, am I okay? Is this normal? Am I gonna be all right? And there was also a 4-month window between the time I had my tests and things done to the time I had the procedure. If you're not careful too, you can go back and think, oh my God, what if something happened in that window that I didn't know? What if it had spread, or what if it this or that? There was never, because I didn't go the conventional route.
Yeah.
I never had full body scans or anything like that done to confirm that, yeah, I'm totally cancer free. But you are never really truly cancer free, because our bodies are circulating cancer cells all the time. It's just the environment that you're providing that enables your body to kill off those cancer cells and prevent them from forming into a tumor.
Then for a woman going through some of this and having surgeries, your body's not the same. And that's got to mess with you mentally.
It did. And when they were speaking to me, losing my breasts, I came to pieces. I've found in some of the women that I talked to, that I met through the place I was going to have my vitamin infusions, it's interesting to hear other women's perspectives, because sometimes they were like, I didn't care. I breastfed my children. They're grown. They serve their purpose. I didn't care. I wanted the cancer gone. Whereas with me, it was like, again, my part of my journey back to self-love, that was the one part of my body that I felt like I loved more than anything. I felt like I hated the rest of my body, but that was the one part that I felt was perfect and I was somewhat proud of, was that. And it's a warped way to look at it, and maybe even coming from the ego in a sense, but I was willing to do whatever I had to do to make sure they didn't take my breasts from me and fight for that. And I would look at them in the mirror and even tell them, I love you, you're worth fighting for, and you're worth whatever I have to go through to make sure I don't lose you. So it was a whole other thing around that, very, very sacred thing to me. I've never had kids, so it wasn't coming from a place of having breastfed kids or anything like that. It was just, it's a part, at the end of the day, it's a part of my body, just like any other organ or just like any other.
It's a part of you and you loved yourself.
Yeah. So the idea of losing any part of me was just something I couldn't wrap my head around. But now that my breast is healing, and even though this procedure doesn't leave a big scar, because the incision that she makes is very small to do this procedure with, it still creates a lot of scar tissue inside my breast. And so given that you have this dead frozen tumor inside of you and the dead frozen surrounding tissue, and your body has to do what it's going to do to rid itself of that, or over time, you don't know what that's really going to look like. It's different with everyone. So I've found that I'm a lot more protective of myself, and it also presents a whole different challenging set of circumstances, because you sometimes feel like, oh, I look different now. Like when I look at myself in the mirror with maybe just a t-shirt on and without a bra on, I can tell that my breasts don't both look the same anymore. One's a little bit of a different size and in different shape. And I know women go through this that have had lumpectomies, obviously, and whatever they ended up doing. I know that other women have experienced this in the past too. There's a lot of things tied to our breasts emotionally and deep within. So that's all been part of the journey too.
Yeah, it's difficult. And I appreciate the fact how you sat there and said you looked in the mirror and told your body that you loved yourself. Because our cells hear that. Our body understands that. They're doing, I don't know what you call it, but they've got these videos out now where they take a bottle of water and they put a pitcher next to it and they freeze the water. And when they look at the frozen water, there is an image of the cell phone or whatever that was next to the bottle. Water has memory. Our body's mostly water. Yeah. Our word is so important.
It's so important. And again, that's something that I learned in this journey. I had no idea that was so impactful. Yes, your cells, your body hears everything that you're telling it. And that's now being scientifically shown and scientifically proven. I had a whole routine I would do every morning, which I still do, where it involved meditation, affirmations, visualization, movement, exercise. And in those affirmations, that's what I would tell myself, and that I loved myself. And that's something that I had to learn how to do, because again, I never felt that way. I was always looking at myself and only seeing the things that were wrong with me, and never seeing the things that were right, the good things. But yeah, again, this whole entire journey has been nothing but amazing, and continues to blow me away all the time. Not just with all the different things I'm learning about, but just my connection with Source, with God, and with all of it and everything that constantly gets shown to me as a result of that.
It makes life interesting, doesn't it? So one of the things I've been doing since I seen that, we go out to dinner to eat. Some of us eat food. You eat whatever vegans eat. I don't know whatever veganism is. I don't know what that is. I'm just saying. My favorite joke is when somebody's a vegan because they're going to tell you. So
Yeah, definitely will come up in conversation at some point.
But you know what? You honoring your body and eating that way brought you to that lady at the restaurant like 12 years later or whatever, who connected you to the doctor.
She connected me to Chris' work, to the
yeah,
breast
right,
cancer.
yeah.
Yeah, and then she helped me form sort of the foundation of where to start. Because again, you just get bombarded with so much information and so many different things. And she laid it all out. Start with this, do this. And here's a couple of good documentaries that you should watch. And here's some good books you should read, so forth and so on. Again, always trusting that nothing ever happens in life by mistake or coincidence.
No.
We are all on a divinely guided path, whether we want to acknowledge that and be with that or not. But that's something that has also come from this too.
Yeah, yeah. So Fawn, you have had an extraordinary journey
so far, and I continue to have an extraordinary journey.
So hopefully you'll come back on the show. And I am seriously looking forward to you starting your podcast. One of the reasons I asked you on the podcast, there's lots of reasons, but this was one of them. To show you and see you go through this, because this is what you're supposed to be doing. So I got that little nudge from Spirit, and I'm like, okay, we can bring her on the show.
Yes, thank you for that. I really do appreciate that. I've had that in my head for a while, almost as a way to give back to what I've learned and taken away from the podcasts that I listen to. Danny Morell's podcast has been the podcast that has helped me in so many ways. I was already listening to his podcast. I discovered him about 5 months, I think, before my diagnosis. So it was almost as if I was having the foundation laid down before the diagnosis. And through him and through the guests that he has on his podcasts, I've learned so many things and learned so much about life and health and knowledge and worlds that existed that I didn't even realize existed. You can go into so many different places with all of it. I hope to make it to one of his live events. I also have him to thank for leading me to the plant medicine retreat in Costa Rica that he stands behind, the only one that he stands behind. Through his own journey with plant medicine and ayahuasca, I knew that was something that I felt called to do, and it all worked out that I could to go and experience that. Yeah, I look at it in that way. I know obviously tons and tons of people have podcasts these days, but I feel like I have an amazing journey to share with people. And
You do.
I want to give back in that way and see where God takes me to be of service to people.
You have a message of hope, and somebody needs to hear that message. And when we were talking in the kitchen beforehand, I said, this is going to be a healing day for you. And you're like, is it? Your message is going to change lives. I love that for you.
I have so much love, and I have so much love for people that are going through this or that have been through this. And it can take so many different shapes and so many different forms. And I just want to know, I just want women to know that they're not alone in this journey, and everything that you're feeling and thinking, and it's all normal. And if there was a message for me to put out there to someone that's going through this, it's not to be scared and not to be afraid of your own body and what your body is doing, and give it love, give it compassion, give it understanding, and look at it in the sense that our bodies are amazing works of art and so obviously made in the image of God. When you look at how they function down to every cell, every blood vessel, every bone, every muscle, every organ, every body part, it's just so amazing. And it's the most intricately designed machine. And the more I learn about it, the more blown away I am. And so that's part of my whole self-love journey too, is honoring my body, nourishing it with the absolute best foods, the best practices, pampering it, making sure I tell it how much I love it all the time and how much I'm grateful for this sacred vessel that moves us through this precious gift of life that we've been blessed with from God, from Source. Again, my message to any woman or anyone that's dealing with this is you're not alone and don't be scared. It's not the death sentence, so to speak, that they try and make you feel like it is. And no matter what prognosis you're given, don't fall victim to that prognosis. Don't fall victim to both the diagnosis and the prognosis, because no one knows how long you have to live but God.
Sure.
No doctor knows that.
And I would add to that, don't claim your disease. When they diagnosed with stage 1, I called my daughter immediately. I told her, and I said, I'll never speak that word again. I went right into self-healing. I went and seen Margaret. I went to the mountain, worked with the Lakota, the medicine woman. I went in and I do not see myself with that. And when they came back to do the test, it wasn't there. I see friends who put it on the internet. Oh, I've got this. And they stop fucking talking about it. I'm not saying stick your head in the sand, but stop claiming the disease.
Yeah, it's very easy to have that consume you, and it almost becomes your identity in a way. And even I got to the point where I don't want to talk about this anymore. Like, I'm tired of it being like a shadow that follows me around everywhere. But I also realized that my experience was very unique. And like I said, I want to be of service to others, and whatever shape that takes remains to be seen. But even if it's just putting my story out there and talking to people in my day-to-day life that God brings into my path to help in some way. But yeah, it's been such an amazing experience, and I have nothing but love and gratitude for it all, even in my darkest moments.
That's right. Fawn, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me on your show.
It was wonderful. And when your podcast is really famous and you're making all this money, and don't forget us, okay, the little people.
You've been listening to Enlightenment Unknown with Wes Coons, your guide on the quest for self-discovery and the version of you we haven't met yet.